Welcome back to Green Disruptors, Scaling the Future, the show where we dive into the real stories behind the leaders transforming the clean energy landscape. I'm your host, Megan, and in today's episode, I sit down with Sean Palfenier, co-owner and CEO of Riverside Energy. From starting out as an oil and gas electrician to now leading one of Western Canada's most community-driven solar companies, Sean shares the human side of scaling impact. We talk Indigenous partnerships, the future of community solar, lesson learned from early mistakes, and the quiet power of tracking your data. Let's dive in. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Green Disruptors. This podcast is brought to you by Mountaintop Social Marketing. We help green tech companies scale. And today I'm excited to have a conversation with Sean Palfenier. He is the CEO of Riverside. So hi, Sean.
Hey, Megan. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, Riverside Energy, I should say.
Yeah. Yeah, Riverside Solar. Yeah, it gets confusing.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit first just about who you are and how you got in with the company.
Sure. So, Sean, I have a background in electrical. So, I was an electrician just over 10 years ago working in the oil and gas sector and just didn't feel right, I guess, at the time. It was, good money, a lot of people, but looking around at the waste and what we're doing, maybe moral compass thing, but
Yeah.
at the end of the day, I wanted to do something that was a little bit more fulfilling, even if it meant making less money. I originally volunteered here at Riverside. It was a small company, about four people at the time. I just told them I wanted to learn about solar and storage, and I'd be willing to work on weekends. They just said, "Why don't you come by and work for us for a day?" And that was kind of it. Did one day, and they said, "Here you go. You're on board," and then slowly moved into more of a sales role, and then over time purchased some shares in the company, and now one of four owners here and run the day-to-day operations.
That's kind of amazing. I think that's a really valuable story for somebody who's either trying to enter a new industry or just get in with a company. You're like, I'm here to learn, I'm here to add value, and here you are, a co-owner. So that's amazing.
Yeah, thanks. It was cool.
How long has the company been in business?
Since 1995, so this is our
Okay.
30th year. Yeah.
Okay. So I guess let's start off and help people just understand a little better who you guys are and who you serve and maybe what makes you unique.
For sure. So we started out by doing micro hydro, wind, solar, battery storage. We've since narrowed our focus to residential, commercial, solar and storage projects with highlighting a lot of First Nations and Indigenous work. That's kind of the work that we enjoy doing. So I always refer to it as checking some boxes. You have to be able to make some money. You have to be able to help people save money, do something good for the planet, and then finally, where we are in BC, Canada, there's a reconciliation piece there too with Indigenous communities. So kind of checks a fourth box, and that's a lot of the work we do. And yeah, it's just been fun to watch it grow.
Okay, so tell me, maybe you can just kind of touch on one of those points. Tell me more about some of these projects working with Indigenous Nation people.
For sure. So they're typically tight-knit communities.
Mm-hmm.
If anybody's hitchhiking on the side of the road, you pick them up because you want to give them a ride, and that's just what you do there when you're tight-knit. Everybody helps each other out, and so they've got their backs up a little bit because they do get a lot of federal funding or provincial funding for especially green energy projects. So they get their door knocked on a lot. So in order to really build trust, you have to be able to show some good faith and do some things up front that are just, hey, maybe it's as much as showing a proposal or doing a pilot project and then really showing that you're there to genuinely help. And, we use a term capacity building. That's where we want to involve members of the community at the construction phase, offer training opportunities. So again, members of the community don't have to rely on a company like Riverside to come back and swap an inverter or fix a panel. They've now got the knowledge to do that themselves, and so it's enabling them to be a part of it, but it's also showing the next generation when I'm talking to kids in a local school there about opportunities in the industry as it continues to grow. So it's a lot of fun.
I mean, that's really cool because the broader mission is to build resilience within a community and energy independence, which can ripple effect into a lot of other opportunities within those communities, I'm sure.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah. That's the thing is, you could look at maybe one of the volunteer projects that Riverside has done in the past. It was actually overseas, wasn't for Indigenous specific, but in Guatemala, you could look at Google Earth, and it was a very small community. There wasn't much going on there, but after the volunteer solar project was finished, they were able to pump water up from the ground instead of hiking it, miles at a time. And then over time on Google Earth, you can start to see the infrastructure really build out just from having access to power, being able to draw water from the ground, attracts more people there. It was cool to see.
That is cool. I'm curious, I mean, since you guys have been doing this for longer, what has that establishing a relationship with these people like? Maybe what mistakes did you make in the past and how are you better at it now?
I would say, yeah, with the relationships, as far as mistakes, is, maybe setting expectations is a big thing. You want to be really clear up front what you can provide and what you can't provide. So when you say anything like solar and storage, it really leaves it open for interpretation. There's just so many options that you could do. And so it's good to be clear that, when we're providing solar, it's not going on multiple tracking systems that are going to follow the sun around the skyline, because that's going to introduce more maintenance components and things can break down. You don't want to be flashy. We're there to just put something in that's going to function, and it's going to, 25 plus years.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like an important, I mean, I myself face that in my business, like with clients, like you have to be very clear and repeat yourself a lot about what you can do and what you can't do. And so I think that's relatable for across the whole, everyone you serve. So
Absolutely. Yeah, we call it a upfront contract where it's,
mhm.
we're very clear what we're doing, and then just reiterating, are we on the same page? So it's
Yeah.
important.
Yeah, I agree. So, how's it going now in terms of like where you're at in your growth and like maybe what the next goals for the next year are?
It's good. We, again, I say we started out, there was about five of us, approaching 40 full-time employees. It's a good time in the industry with, back in 2021, incentives started to be introduced from a federal level, and then notably last year at a provincial level, there's been some financial backing behind solar projects. As far as growth goes, it's always going to be challenging. Communication is the hardest part as you keep adding key members to staff, but
Mm,
also, the utility and rates and the government regulations around installing this type of product and service is probably the biggest challenge, because when you get to a certain capacity in a province or in a state, wherever you are, and there's a certain solar saturation, the utilities start to look at it as a competition. And so now you're part of the competition. There's going to be pushback on how much solar you can install, or what the valuation of solar is going to be, or exported energy is going to be, depending on the market saturation. So it's a real challenge when trying to grow, because you'd love to hire, double the staff and go get the jobs done twice as fast, and get paid twice as fast, but it's very hard to scale that quickly. And if you're not scaling and new incentives come out, then you're not ready for it, and someone else can come in and maybe take a lot of that low hanging fruit business. But it's a balancing act for sure.
So, does that competition factor in the saturation? Does that ever affect like whether or not you're able to get the incentives, or is it just a sheer, whoever can land the projects first?
Maybe twofold, because at a federal level, the incentives were not just for solar, it was for heat pumps and windows and other kind of greenhouse gas reduction options that homeowners could move towards. So in our area, heat pumps take up a lot of that funding. So solar got a certain portion of it, but I don't think it really plays into it where we lost out because more people did heat pumps. It's just always building awareness. And if you'd asked me 5 years ago about competition, I would have said, I don't want them here, get them out of here. But over time you
Mm,
learn that competition's a good thing. And when you're sharing marketing efforts and you're getting the word out, at the end of the day, if a homeowner chooses to go solar with us or another company, it still feels good that they want to do their part for the environment. So it's cool.
that's an interesting perspective because I feel like there's a generational shift happening right now where we're seeking to collaborate even if we're in competition. And it seems even more applicable in trying, the race to reduce emissions. So it's like, yeah, you have to stay in business, but like if you are seen publicly as being cooperative with the community and with your competitors, like I imagine that can't be bad for business.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, I'm on multiple committees with competitors because we're all looking at that same end goal, which is, don't make the industry overly saturated and too good where everybody from across the world shows up because it's just the time to put solar on every house, but, make it sustainable and make it possible to grow. And we're a little bit lucky in Western Canada because we have the option to see historically what's happened in Asian countries, in the US, even in Eastern Canada with different incentive programs that have rolled out, what it's done to those certain areas. And I mean,
Mm.
California is a prime example too.
So, what have you noticed? Are there some key takeaways with that?
You just have to be careful when you over incentivize something. It can bring a bad group of apples to the group or
Mm.
to the industry. And there's consumer protection acts that are possible, but then you look at like a marketing campaign like knocking on doors or going door to door, which is something we did experiment with because of how successful it's been in other markets. But what ends up happening, it's not as prevalent here in BC, but you end up with what's called like a red line in the solar industry. So
Mm.
companies will subcontract their sales or their subcontract their installations, and when you're subcontracting your sales, you're essentially telling those companies like, hey, we'll do this project at $25,000, whatever it is. It leaves the sales reps open to sell it for whatever they want, and if the customer is willing to pay and the incentives are strong enough that it still makes a good business case for the homeowner, it doesn't matter if the sales rep's getting $10,000 commission on a project, and then it just keeps snowballing to the point where it's not good. And yeah,
I imagine that puts a bad reputation on the industry at large when stuff like that happens.
absolutely, yeah. And I mean, it's not just them. Like some people can do
Yeah.
this with integrity. It's still, it could be anything. It could be as far as just collecting deposits and then never showing up to do a project. It's not just to the solar industry,
That's
but
happened to me
yeah.
with construction.
I'm sorry, that's brutal.
Yeah, luckily it wasn't, I mean, it was enough money to be mad about, but not enough to put us under. So,
Yeah,
but yeah, that happens for sure.
yeah.
So, you talked about the door knocking and the, so have you found that there has been an outreach strategy to get new jobs that has been more effective?
Um, Good question. You're asking for my secret marketing sauce, maybe in a way, but
You can give me high
it's
level.
yeah, I can give you a high level. I mean, for outreach strategy, it's a high ticket item. It's a
Yeah,
long sales cycle,
long sales cycle.
and what we found, the best is watering the grass where you're growing. And so it's really taking care of the people that have already trusted you to do a project with them, asking them for referrals, making sure they receive good service, because over 50% of our inbound inquiries are referrals or word of mouth, whether they
50%
over, yeah, I'd say it's
over.
closer to
That's
60.
congratulations on that.
Thanks. It's, they're not going to openly tell you that they heard your ad on the radio or that they saw your sign on the billboard. They're going to say Bob down the street did it and had nothing but good things to say about you guys. So, you know, typically you have to see something 7 times for you to think it's your idea, and then you make a move on it. But at the end of the day, it's really when someone's had a good experience that they're open to reaching out. That's more inbound. Outbound, again, we knocking on doors did work. Like, I'm not going to say it didn't work. It just can damage the reputation a little bit. Not everyone's as open to somebody knocking on their door and pitching them on the spot. I haven't explored a lot of telemarketing. I know that's getting a lot bigger in certain states, with certain states outlawing door-to-door sales. Those have been the biggest things. Email campaigns. And then if I did have to say, our strongest outbound would be a newsletter it's not dedicated to like a sales pitch. Like, it's actually providing good information, similar to your podcast. You're trying to provide your audience with, useful information. And when you can do that, again, it's just showing people that, even like I referred to the Indigenous communities, you're trying to give them something before you're asking for anything. So
Absolutely.
the
Yeah.
newsletter was really powerful.
That's great. I mean, it is. It's relationship and trust building. It gives them a chance to naturally let their guard down. I would love to hear someone who does love when salesmen knock on their door. I think for me, if I like really need something and they just got lucky by knocking on my door, maybe. But normally it's like, I'm feeding my kids dinner. Please go away. So
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
So yeah, sounds like you've become wise.
Yeah.
So in that sense, what advice would you give either like you from the past or like a newer company in the industry that's just getting started?
As far as outbound or just marketing in general, or
Just like we can go even broader than that, like growth. But yeah, I guess marketing.
okay. Yeah, maybe some advice would be, don't be afraid to try different strategies, but the best advice I could give would be do your best to track and maintain the data accurately, because if you can't look at where your leads are coming from and you can't measure your demographic or you can't target your market, you're wasting money. And it seems like a lot more effort to punch a few more keys or jot a few more notes down when you could be focusing your efforts on sending another email. But it's when you have accurate data that you can start to make real unbiased decisions on what to do with that. So, if your marketing budget is 1 to 4% of your estimated revenue, you want to be spending that in the area that's going to yield the most highly prospective leads that are going to convert. So, yeah, maybe that's some advice.
Yeah, oh, that's beautiful advice. And it's like you can't make that decision without the data. And even if it feels you're going to have to set up some systems to get that data, but it's going to save you so much time, make you so much more money. Like it's very worth doing. So,
Yeah, and it can feel painful. It can take a lot of time, and you always want it to happen yesterday, but
yeah.
you'll appreciate it and you'll thank yourself, in a year's time.
Well, and that's, I mean, every business makes mistakes and things, but it's always so frustrating to look back maybe 3 months and be like, I missed this key thing that has been a bottleneck and I didn't notice until now because maybe the data wasn't in place or maybe nobody was looking at the data, and that's makes us want
Percent.
to pull our hair
Yeah.
out. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
so what are you excited about? Like for what's next for Riverside?
A lot of exciting things. We always joke that the biggest problem is maybe too much opportunity. So, as far as the next biggest exciting thing, Canada has a path to electrification over the next 25 years. And more than anything, I'm excited to see the shift away from, fossil fuels and non-renewables and, just seeing people go to electric vehicles, finding more sustainable options, and then just solar being a complement to all of it. So I think it's an exciting 25 years to come as we keep shifting to that net zero goal. And, there's a lot of opportunities. There's community solar level opportunities where you could install a large system and that could benefit, members of a neighborhood or even members of the same First Nations band that might not live in the same area but could benefit from the solar credits that they're accumulating on that project. So I think the big projects are always a little bit more exciting when I have to
Yeah.
think of like future opportunities. I don't know why. It's, I get the same satisfaction out of a homeowner smiling about their project as I do a business owner that's just done a megawatt. So it's cool.
I mean, that is really cool thinking of it in the broad terms of the impact that you're making, that the whole world's really trying. But it's got to just feel good, like compared to what you used to do, to be like, we're showing up every day to do our part. And I hope you sleep well at night.
Yeah, it's fun, right? And you get a sense of maybe you don't feel so bad when somebody asks, what do you do for work?
Yeah, you're like, well, let me tell you. Yeah, that's nice. I feel like I should have asked this 10 minutes ago, and it's going to feel clunky, but we talked a lot about the residential side of it. Do you find that the challenges are different for commercial, like as far as finding people and getting projects
Absolutely.
approved?
Yeah, there's a couple factors for sure. In a sense, there's the economies of scale with what we're doing. When you're doing call it a 5 kilowatt project, roughly, let's just use round numbers, $20,000 versus five 50 kilowatt project, you don't have that same cost per watt because the permitting requirements, the inverter selection, everything is just the cost per watt's going to go down as it goes up in size of a system. So it makes it a little bit more attractive in that way. However, in the commercial sector, they're going to pay a little bit less for their electricity. It's also all about the numbers when it comes to B2B sales versus B2B. So when you're showing a customer the value add to their home, that could speak volume to them where they might be looking at selling in the next 5, 10 years. And, they're going to get some money back for this. Whereas a commercial business only wants to see the bottom line. When are they going to get their return on their initial investment? And that's what they care about.
So how are you showing that to them? And like, have you found there's one way that works better?
For the commercial sector?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I have found that 10 years is about the magic number. If it's
Mm,
anything more than 10 years, the checkbook goes away. If it's under that,
interesting.
they start to consider it. I couldn't tell you why. It's person dependent too, right? Like some
I
people will
mean,
still,
maybe it's just the finite, like, I can maybe picture where I'll be in 10 years, 20, forget about it.
yeah, or they could look at something else where, they could invest that same money in another business
Yeah,
and get their money back in 5 years. So it's trickier that way, but it goes back to the marketing efforts. You want to be talking to the people that want to deal with you. You don't want to be talking to everybody because you're going to be wasting your breath. So
absolutely. Yeah. Well, that's an interesting challenge. I mean, some of these sustainability companies are only working B2B, but it's like you have to tackle both of those. So that's no small job.
yeah, and it's fairly new where we are in our particular area as far as commercial businesses getting on board with this. And it's similar to the residential sector. When you see more homes with solar, you start to think, well, maybe that's a good idea and I should look into it. For
Hmm.
businesses here in our area, it's still fairly new, and you don't see a lot of them that have put panels on the roof.
So maybe there's not businesses noticing the business next door that has it as it is in residential. Do you think there's more resistance, or is it just you're earlier on the track?
Combination, maybe it's a little bit of old school mentality. Solar doesn't work, or we're going to have issues with it, or whatever it might be. But also, my buddies haven't done it, so why would I look at it? And nobody wants to be the first one, right? So, yeah.
There's got to be a couple special first ones.
Yeah.
Those first adopters. So it's yeah, finding those people is probably tricky.
Yeah, yeah, it can be,
Yeah.
but they're out there, and when you get to
Yeah.
meet them, and it's always a good experience, and it's a lot of fun. And then make sure that once you've done a project and you've done a good job, you're showcasing that, and you're using that in your material, and you're asking for referrals, because if you've done a good job and someone's happy, they're more than happy to talk about it. Especially this kind of project, it's something that people are excited to tell others that they've done.
Yeah. Well, there's like literally something to show that they now have ownership over, that they feel proud and excited about.
Yeah, something unique from, working with hotels. It's, what does that next generation really value? And when you look at like Gen Z employees, which is, a lot of the workforce, number one on their value scale is mental health. And then number two is sustainability. So we've even had a hotel tell us that they'd be exploring solar as an option for their hotel just to retain employees and show them that they're doing
Wow.
something. So yeah, it's
Yay,
interesting.
Gen Z.
Yeah,
That's wild.
yeah,
Oh man. I
different
love that though.
motivations.
That's yeah. Yeah. And when somebody's got to push the pin somewhere. You just got to find where, what the right angle is. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Well, I mean, this was an exciting conversation. It's cool to see. I mean, it's definitely in a huge tipping point spot where it's just going to get bigger and bigger and the opportunity is going to grow. So, sounds like you're positioning yourself well.
hope so.
Yeah.
We can only do what we know, and if there's other business owners out there, it's I mentioned the data and tracking. Like, try to find a system that works for you, because for a long time we weren't tracking it, and it feels like you're driving without fuel gauges or speedometer, and you need those things to be able to predict and make strategic decisions.
Absolutely. Yes. Well, is there anything you'd like to add before we wrap up?
No, just anybody else who's in the industry, thanks for being a part of it, and wishing you the best of luck, because it's a good positive change globally. So thank you.
Absolutely. Well, I'll turn that back around at you and say thank you for the work you're doing and for the positive impact on the communities and the world at large. So people like you are give me hope.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks again to Sean for such an insightful conversation. If there's one thing that stuck with me, it's that growth doesn't always mean flash. It means trust, systems, and being in it for the long game. If you found value in this episode, consider sharing it with someone working in sustainability or clean tech. And if you're a founder or marketer in this space looking to scale your impact, Green Disruptors is here to support that journey. Until next time, keep disrupting, keep building.